Okay, to get things started tonight, could I please get a sound check? Let me know how audio is going. Let me know how the video is feeding. If anybody out there could just let me know, how's the audio, how's the visual feed right now? Jadwell, thank you so much for letting me know. Appreciate it. Thank you for the feedback. Lena, thank you for the feedback. Jesse, appreciate that. If you guys are wondering why I'm looking over to the side, I'm just looking at the chat. What's going on, Chris? Thank you for tuning in to watch. Much appreciated. Glad you can make it. Glad you all are here. We'll just kind of wait for a lot of the different viewers to kind of pop in. And as you guys are coming in, go ahead and say your hellos. This is the first edition of SNE Mobile Tech on the JGnation podcast. This is number one of a series of podcasts that we're going to be doing every Sunday. So let me know as you guys are coming in how everything is going. Say your hellos. This is our first time going in. So I'm excited. I have a lot of excitement, and you know, I've done podcasts before. I've live streamed several times. I have my own YouTube channel. I'll get to that shortly. I'll explain more of that as we get more people popping in. So as of right now, we've got 15 here in the live chat and watching the video. Awesome turnout thus far. We'll wait for some more people to get in. I'm going to go ahead and get into the live chat, see who's here, and see who said hello. Let's see here. Zhao Dre, YT. Hello, thank you for stopping in. Lena, thank you for being here. Special shout out. Israel Cruz, thank you for being here. Much appreciated. JGTechBlog, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for stopping in, saying hello. Jesse, thank you for being here. Chris, glad you could make it. Thanks for stopping by. Chi-Ho, yeah, classroom. I am a school teacher. I'll get to more of my background information in a minute as everybody's kind of coming in. Ibis Paris, from Miami. Well, hello from Cleveland, Ohio. Let's see here. Rafael, hello, glad you could be here. Thank you for stopping by. Now that's Rafael Perez, I'm guessing. Not to be confused with the Portuguese Rafael, I'm assuming. Hopefully I'm not wrong. And Raven's Revenge, glad you could be here. Thank you for tuning in. As we're waiting for everybody to kind of pile in here, we'll wait a couple more minutes before we actually start the topics for the podcast. Let's go ahead and if you have any questions or anything you want to ask quickly, we can get to those and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the topics. Let's see here. Ibis Paris says, what do you think about the Samsung Galaxy? I'm assuming you're talking about the Samsung Galaxy S10. In that case, I am impressed. I actually really like the device. The S10e looks like a pretty formidable competition type device for the iPhone XR. That being the case, I think if somebody was making a decision between the XR and the S10e, I think I would probably go the S10e route if I was kind of in that budget segment. But you know, unless you're like deeply entrenched into the Apple ecosystem, the S10e is a formidable opponent there. The S10 and S10 Plus are obviously very impressive. But for some reason, I feel like the S10e is going to be the big seller. I think a lot of people are going to go that route. A lot of people probably waiting for the Note 10 also. I think that's going to be a big-time device for Samsung this year. Let's see who else is in here. Cindy Payne, glad you could be here from Athens, Georgia. Hopefully warmer than the 38 degrees here in Cleveland, Ohio. Hi, Yasmin. Glad you could be here, Baba. Let's see here. Yeah, Ibis, Samsung S10, not much money. Oh, as much money? Oh, well, compared to the $1,000 flagships we're seeing, it's probably not a bad way to go if you're on a budget. Jamal, glad you could be here, buddy. Thank you for following me over to JGTechBlog. Much appreciated. Jamal's a longtime subscriber to the SNE Mobile Tech channel. Glad you could be here, brother. All right, so now that we're about 5 minutes in and we've already kind of got the live chat going a little bit, let's get into kind of what we're going to do in terms of a topic and what we're going to be discussing in today's podcast. So what I'm going to do with today's podcast is I'm going to let it serve as kind of an introduction to myself as well as what we're doing here with this particular podcast. And then we'll kind of get into the actual factuals of today's topic. So what I'll kind of do is give you guys a little bit of background on me. So in terms of a little bit about myself. I am Sneed from Sneed Mobile Tech. I have my own YouTube channel. I've gone ahead and I've plugged it in the description box below inside of this video. And what I do with my YouTube channel is I provide a lot of videos on network updates, a lot of the different things that are going on with all the different providers, whether it's postpaid or prepaid, anything from network technology to network performance, root metrics reports, earnings calls from the carriers, anything going on with prepaid in terms of plans and specials and promotions. I don't necessarily do anything with like hardware and smartphone reviews, but I do a lot with, different types of reports and things of that nature. So what I do with my channel might be a little bit different than what JG, specifically does with his, but I think together we offer something, really comprehensive here on the JGTechBlog channel. I'm not a stranger to the podcasting. I'm not a stranger to live streaming and live chats. I've been doing that for quite a while, and I have quite the following on my own YouTube channel. So if you're interested in what Sneed Mobile Tech has to offer, there's a link to the description below. You can just search Sneed Mobile Tech on YouTube and it should pop up. Go ahead and subscribe and ding the bell to be notified whenever I upload those videos. Excellent content. I do my best to keep all of my subscribers up to date on whatever's going on with the wireless space. So whether it's postpaid, plans, features, analysis, reports, or prepaid, the same thing. What's going on with the Sprint and T-Mobile merger? Obviously, that's kind of taken a big hold of what everybody's doing in terms of paying attention to wireless. And actually, in terms of what we're doing today, it's going to revolve around that topic, the Sprint and T-Mobile merger. So, yeah, that's kind of what we're doing here with this particular segment with the weekly podcast. All right, so just to pop back in to the live chat, D. Harris, thank you for being here. Much appreciated. Chris Juarez, thank you for being here. Let's see here. All right, so yeah, Chase, thank you for being here. Much appreciated. Yeah, we'll talk about the Sprint and T-Mobile regulations process actually with this video. So let's just go ahead and get into the topic. So specifically, I think what everybody kind of wants to know with the merger is if it's going to be approved or not. I think a lot of the attention on my channel is it's mostly speculation. We're speculating if we feel like the merger is going to pass or if we think it's going to be denied. And there's reason to believe both sides, honestly. As of right now, and kind of the topic of today's podcast is we've got a lot of things to consider that kind of are stacking up against the merger. So in terms of who's opposing the merger, we have a Democratic representative. Her name is Rashida Tlaib. I'm not really sure about the last name. I definitely know the first name is Rashida. The last name, I don't know, the spelling's kind of tough. But she is spearheading an effort to block the merger. Now, this is not to say that the merger is at risk. Honestly, I think the problem with this representation and their opposition to the merger, the problem is actually that they don't make the final decision. So even though these representatives are opposing it, it's Republicans, it's independents, it's also Democrats. It's not really a Democrat and Republican thing. They've kind of created this report, this gang, if you will, a collection of representatives that want to oppose the merger because they fear the competition would suffer, they fear that pricing and how it would affect consumers, how it's going to shape the market in the future. So they are concerned, and that is kind of like their main idea of why they oppose the merger. Now, a lot of you out there are probably thinking, well, I'm for it, I'm pro-merger. Some of you may feel I'm anti-merger. That's not really, the concept here. The concept of this merger is what would it do to the consumer? Because we represent the consumer here on JGTechBlog and the Sneed Mobile Tech YouTube channel. So that's kind of my approach to the merger. I don't look at it from, I belong in the T-Mobile camp or I belong in the Sprint camp or I'm in another carrier camp. It's really about what this does for us. And I think a lot of you can agree, whether prepaid or MVNO or postpaid, this merger has very direct implications to our bills and how much we're going to be paying for service. So that's kind of the approach we take here. Now, in terms of the opposition, this representative, Rashida Tlaib, and her cronies in terms of, her camp and everybody that's against it, they're concerned about the competition side of this. They're concerned about the pricing, that it's going to increase. Now, lawmakers have really no say in this matter. Ultimately, it is up to the DOJ, the Department of Justice. It's also up to the FCC. So no matter what representatives have to say, it's really up to them. T-Mobile executives have reportedly spent many a nights, I think it's estimated to be $195,000 at Trump hotels. So in this report that we've read, and if any of you watched the congressional hearings last week, you're pretty well aware of this. John Leger reported, these numbers. He was very transparent. He did not deny it. So it's not like it's being questioned as fact. It is considered to be fact. And as of right now, I mean, that's kind of the big stick is this going to implicate the merger in any way that it's going to derail it? Now, personally, the push from the representatives, Rashida Tlaib and her fellow members, do you guys think it's going to particularly slow down the merger? I say no, but it's possible. Depends if they find that there were any regulations involved with the hotel stays. If there was any type of violations, that could really complicate things. Is that affiliation going to be enough between T-Mobile executives and Trump hotels? I'm not really sure. I think in the grand scheme of things, it might be a bit of a speed bump. It might slow down things, but it's probably not going to derail the merger. I think there's other angles to take besides those Trump hotel stays. Meanwhile, part of the Trump administration goals is to get the next election campaign going with government control over 5G. Obviously, Trump has a big stake in 5G because it implicates China, and they want to compete with international, other countries' international networks. So there's a lot going on there. I try to say it's not political because I don't see it as a Democrat-Republican thing, but it is political in that the administration wants to get their hands into the 5G, and also the merger itself, how is it proceeding through the regulatory bodies, through the FCC and the DOJ. So I think almost to a certain extent, the merger is kind of political. Now, the focus areas that we're gonna look at today, we're gonna look at the consumer perspective. That's gonna be my main focus with it. I'm going to try to give you guys my perspective as a consumer, because even though I'm reporting here on a channel, even though I'm making a YouTube video, I'm podcasting, I still purchase service for wireless, as you guys do the same. So I'm giving you my perspective as it is as from a consumer. Also, I think what we should talk about is we want to take this approach of being unbiased. We want to have, an open mind. We want to have skepticism. We're on no sides here. I don't have any affiliations with any carriers. Like I said, I represent the consumer. That's us. So I'm going to be analytical. I'm going to be skeptical. That's just the way I am. As a science teacher, that's what I teach my students, and that's my approach to any type of information. So I don't have any sponsors. I don't have any affiliations to any carriers. I have no biases. I'm into this no-nonsense approach of finding the truth and what's really going to be helping us, the consumers. So I try to be fair. I try to be honest. I try to be transparent in my perspective. That's the best thing I could do. So I've often been referred to as a man of the people based on what I'm doing here on YouTube. So in terms of my background information, now that you guys know a little bit about me and my goals here on JGnation, we can kind of get started with the nitty-gritty of the podcast. All right, so as I pop into the live chat, I see there's actually quite a bit of action. I see some of you guys have some comments. Chase, mentions that Sprint has $37 million in debt. And honestly, Chase, that's probably the reason why the merger is there. Sprint would not be trying to merge with another company if they didn't have all of this debt. And I think that's the bottom line. Sprint's looking for a way to kind of get out of some of that debt and to become more profitable, because as of late, over the course of the last generation of technology with 4G LTE, Sprint has by far lagged behind all carriers. Now, they have done pretty well in prepaid, but in terms of postpaid, the most profitable segment of, U.S. carrier provisions, they just don't do well in postpaid. They do well in prepaid, but not postpaid. Let's see here. Raphael says, you think the merger should be approved? Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? I'm going to get to that in today's video, but overall, I think it's a good thing. However, I think there's certain segments of this merger that are horrible, and it's kind of like a pick your poison type of deal. It's a trade-off thing. Some things will be good for the merger and other things are going to be bad. Chase says it's good and it should be approved. I think there's going to be some people that disagree with you there, but you could definitely make the argument for sure. Let's see what else here. Christopher Green pops into the live chat. Thank you for stopping by. School teacher. Yeah, I teach high school science. So yeah, all the teachers represented in today's podcast. Raphael says, is that why MCL went out of business? Oh, MCI. Ooh, it's been a while. That was, I believe that was an acquisition, wasn't it? Not really sure. All right, so Chase actually mentioned something important. He says, what about Boost? What about Virgin? What about Sprint in their stores, workers, managers, fathers? Yeah, that's kind of what we're going to get into here, Chase. So I'm glad you could be here. I'm glad you're very excited about this topic. So definitely let me know what your guys' thoughts and opinions are as I go through today's topics. All right, so let's get into some of the very specific parts of the merger. So the first thing I want to talk about is kind of when this all started. So the T-Mobile and Sprint merger dates back to last year when it was first proposed and agreed upon by the two companies. You have T-Mobile, which is the third largest carrier in the U.S. They're somewhere around the 75 to 76 million subscriber count. And then you have Sprint, which is the fourth carrier, the smallest of all. They're probably somewhere around 56 or 57 million subs. Now, in terms of adding those two numbers together, if the two were to merge, that would put them somewhere around 130 subscribers, which would put them in direct competition for the second biggest carrier with AT&T. I think AT&T comes in at about 136 million subs. Verizon's somewhere around 145 million. I want to say those are rough estimates. I'm not positive, so don't quote me on that, but it's probably pretty close to that. Now, in terms of this proposed merger, it was in 2018 when the merger was proposed, and it's been about a year since it's been going through its regulatory paces. So that's quite a bit of a while to go through a merger proposal and not really have distinct evidence as to whether or not it's going to be accepted or approved. So we're kind of waiting on a limb right now. What exactly can we think at this point? If you are going to go on the duration of time, you might think, well, it's probably going to fail. It's been a long time and it has not been approved. But I think actually on the contrary, the fact that it is in such a long progression means that regulators are just being very careful and they're doing a lot of analysis and investigation and they just want to make the right choice. Because once you do this, you can't undo it. And we've learned from AT&T in the past and other mergers and acquisitions, you don't want companies having too much power and too much market share because inevitably they're all about profitability and that could mean it's all coming at the cost of the consumer. So what I want to focus on in terms of all of the reports we have recently, we'll talk about the hearings, we'll talk about all the angles of the merger. So let's go ahead and start first with this week's congressional hearings and actually the recent opposition to the merger. So the first thing to consider, I think, guys, is the economics of the merger. First of all, let's talk about jobs. I think when you talk about a merger or an acquisition, overall, there's going to be a net loss in jobs. There's only so many jobs that are out there when you only have a single company as opposed to two. So we'll say, we're going to compare T-Mobile, the new T-Mobile, compared to T-Mobile and Sprint separate. So in terms of the merger, if you're going from two carriers to one, there's going to have to be job losses. They only can support certain locations. So I don't know if you guys noticed it, but everywhere you go, wherever there's cell phone stores, you'll have a T-Mobile store and you'll have a Sprint store. And they'll be very, very close to each other. And also, you think about the prepaid carriers. If you have a Boost mobile store, it's really close to a Metro PCS or Metro by Tmobile store. So it's only so many locations that they could support. So wherever there's a Sprint and a T-Mobile, it's likely only going to be a T-Mobile. And everywhere you have a Boost and a Metro by T-Mobile, you're only going to have the T-Mobile. So really, you're going to be losing locations. So you're going to be seeing a net loss in jobs. You're going to be seeing, a situation where you can only have so many sales representatives. You can only have so many customer service representatives. Only so many call centers for customer care can be open. There's going to be a consolidation. There's no way around it. There'll be a consolidation of stores. There's going to be a consolidation of managerial positions. It's all going to be kind of condensed. They're going to have to trim the fat, as they say in the market. So having all those extra employees, it's just not going to be profitable. T-Mobile's John Legere, the CEO, has insisted that jobs will be created, not lost. Yeah, some might be created, but that's after the losses, and I can almost guarantee that the job losses are going to outweigh the ones that are created. So I think, unfortunately, that's going to be a big part of the merger, is that jobs are going to be lost in the grand scheme of things. Now, in terms of consumer pricing, I think for the most part, most people will agree that going from a 4-carrier situation here in the US to a 3 is likely to lead to price increasing, less competition. But it is interesting because you think about the US like perspective, like we have 4 carriers, but they're not all on level playing field. Like Verizon's got almost 150 million subs, and AT&T has almost 140 million subs. And they're the big 2, and nobody's even really close. T-Mobile has shown amazing exponential growth every quarter for the last 20 quarters, but they're still at about 75 million subs. And then Sprint, which used to be a mega player in all of this, they've kind of been reduced to just a shell of their former company with only about 57 million subs. I think it's less. I think it's like 55 million. So they're like a distant 3rd and 4th. So a lot of people make the argument, what's the point of having carriers when 2 are legitimate huge players and then the other 2 are just distant 3rd and 4th? This would essentially create, a major 3rd player instead of it being 2 big players and then 2 smaller players. So I think that's an interesting dynamic there. Now, another angle to take is how will this affect postpaid? How will it affect the people that, they're not doing the pay as you go, they're doing the get your service and then pay at the end of the month. So the postpaid customers, I think their pricing is probably going to increase, maybe not immediately, but it's going to increase anyway with 5G. So I know T-Mobile has already come out and said that they would not be increasing pricing for at least 3 years after the merger. That is a big promise that we're not sure if T-Mobile could keep. Of course, things can change, especially in terms of the 5G deployments that we have for future networks. They're going to be buying spectrum. They're going to be, installing new hardware, antenna arrays. There's going to be overhead investment, and there's going to be a lot of costs involved. I'm not sure how they could hold up to that. In terms of prepaid, you think about all the customers that are tied up in this merger. You've got Virgin, which is a Sprint company. You have Boost, which is a Sprint company. You have Metro by Tmobile, which is a T-Mobile company. And then you have all the MVNOs that lease network space from these carriers, and you've got tens of millions of subscribers implicated in this merger in prepaid alone. I get it. TracFone is a big prepaid company. But when you add up Boost and Virgin and Metro by T-Mobile, those numbers add up and they exceed whatever TracFone has. So I think, unfortunately, the prepaid customers are going to be the most affected, especially MVNOs. They're going to probably see the most detriment to their bills. I think their pricing is going to increase. And actually, when the CEOs of Sprint and T-Mobile were asked about prepaid, they kind of pretty much agreed that pricing for prepaid would go up. I think it's pretty much inevitable. You could argue that T-Mobile could hold its promise about not increasing pricing on postpaid. They can't make that guarantee on prepaid. I think prepaid is going to see increasing, whether it's MVNO or Metro by T-Mobile or Boost or Virgin or any of the MVNOs. They're all going to be the most impacted. So unfortunately, I think that's the case. In terms of rural America, for those of you out there that don't live in big urbanized city centers or even in suburbs, if you live in rural America, you've been underserved for a long time. The digital divide is real. They often, in terms of rural regions, they don't have any type of home internet provisions in a lot of cases. They're only supported by regional carriers. This merger actually may stand to help rural America. John Legere, the CEO of T-Mobile, has made several references to rural America and how it's going to be a huge beneficiary of the merger. He's talking about providing home internet. He's talking about providing, expanded service from whether it's prepaid or postpaid. They're really just pushing this idea that rural America, which has been underserved, is going to be a huge beneficiary in the merger. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but it can't be any worse than what it is right now for rural America. The cell phone service is definitely sketchy at best. T-Mobile doesn't have great coverage in rural America. Sprint definitely doesn't either. But combined, maybe T-Mobile can do something with all those spectrum allocations, with all of the network technology. They may be able to do something with the merger. And then throw in the implication of 5G, maybe with a big, broad scale of rolling out 5G, rural America can get 5G, and it could serve as their home internet. So I think rural America stands a chance to improve from the merger, because it really can't get any worse. I don't think it can. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not really sure. We don't really know. But that's kind of how I see the speculation. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention in terms of networks is the 5G side. This is something that has come up time and time again in front of regulatory bodies. So whether it's the DOJ or the FCC considering this, 5G is a really important thing in the future of networks. You have the international approach. How is the U.S. going to compete with China? We know that our current president is really, really stuck on competing with other countries. I think specifically China. When you think about China, China is far ahead in 5G. So we've got some catching up to do. So T-Mobile's claim is that 5G can accelerate and innovate as long as this merger is approved. I think this is going to help competitive edge in the market. I think Verizon and AT&T seeing a third legitimate 5G player will kind of light a fire under them. I think, kind of resting on their laurels in the past, Verizon being so large and dominant and AT&T being so large and dominant, they haven't felt any pressure. Nobody's on their heels. With this merger, we may see a 5G company in the new T-Mobile compete with those two. And I'm not impressed by what T-Mobile has to offer for 5G, which is nothing. That whole 5G escapade from the last was awful. It was awful PR. It was awful execution. It's basically an icon on the top of a phone. It's horrible. So they're not doing anything that has impressed me. Verizon has done nothing to impress me. As a Verizon customer myself, I'm unimpressed. Their 5G has been completely isolated to just a handful of cities and only a few blocks in each of those cities. Their 5G mobility is restricted to just one device, which operates on a Moto mod for 5G service, and it's in 2 cities. So I'm unimpressed. So if I'm thinking to myself, I want the US to have competition and innovation in 5G, the merger only can help in relation to 5G. So getting nationwide 5G and having rapid deployment of 5G, this merger is going to be a positive for that. And I think what T-Mobile is doing in terms of what they're going to be getting out of the Sprint and T-Mobile merger is they want the spectrum from Sprint. Sprint has probably the most impressive and dynamic spectrum portfolio out of all 4 major carriers. The problem with Sprint is that they're so far in debt and they're so far under and behind in LTE that 5G is almost like a pipe dream. They can't do it alone. They've been crying broke to the regulators of the merger for months and months. And it's true, they're in a lot of debt and they don't have the systems, and SoftBank, their parent company, doesn't look like they're interested in spending the money to get Sprint out of the hole. It's been like a life-sucking abyss, or I should say a financial abyss for SoftBank. So this merger, if you think about what T-Mobile wants to do with broadband, they can utilize all of those spectrum holdings that Sprint has to build out a completely wireless home broadband solution, as well as a 5G solution, as well as an LTE solution that's more expanded. So for those of you on T-Mobile, or if you're on a subcarrier, an MVNO or prepaid, it's really important that you were to understand that there's a lot of good that comes from this merger. So whether you're on Metro by T-Mobile or you're on Boost, or your pricing may increase, it may not, who knows. Whether you're on postpaid with any of the carriers, the merger has a lot of pros. And I think that's what people are starting to kind of consider and see. I don't know where you guys stand on it. I'm going to kind of look here in the chat. I see a lot of people are saying that, this merger could really help a lot of customers. I think a lot of people are in agreement there. AT&T and Verizon being these big monopolized, well, it would be a duopoly in this case, In the comment section, well, I should say in the live chat because we are live streaming. In the live chat, you guys tell me, just go ahead and say it. If you're pro-merger or anti-merger, I just want to get the pulse of the people. Francisco asks, are you a teacher? Yes, I'm a school teacher. I'm actually live streaming from my classroom. Yep, absolutely. Deontay says, I'm with Metro by T-Mobile. Metro by T-Mobile is a very good company. They, you think about them as a subsidiary of T-Mobile. They offer competitive rates. They get people unlimited data. They offer quite a bit of value. And they are implicated in this merger. I think T-Mobile is the type of company that once they roll out 5G, that 5G may be available to their prepaid carrier side. I would love to see 5G for Metro by T-Mobile. That would be great. I don't know when it would be. I doubt it would be immediately. I mean, don't you think they'd want to go premium at first? Dark Vader, thank you for being here, man. Glad you could stop in. He says, I am for the merger. I think a lot of people agree. They are very, very pro-merger. Yeah, Chase, it's Metro PCS. I mean, as a company, when Metro was first bought by T-Mobile, they were very different, right? It was Metro PCS. Since, was it 2012 when T-Mobile bought Metro? It was just a matter of time, I think, until they rebranded it. And now with T-Mobile viewed as such a serious contender, I think it made sense for them to add, Metro by T-Mobile to let people know it's not really a standalone. It is the prepaid segment of choice for T-Mobile customers. Yeah, D. Harris, Metro deals are awesome. They do offer great packages. They get people unlimited data for a very fair price. Madman says, I think the merger is a huge win for all. Sprint has such a small market share in the postpaid market. It'll have a negligible effect to competition with the remaining two major players. I think a lot of people agree with you there. I don't think anybody's going to really argue. I think just some people in principle don't like the idea of mergers. They don't like the idea that, going from 4 carriers to 3, how it's going to help. But if they think about the fundamental difference in this situation is Sprint's such a distant 4 and T-Mobile's so far behind because they are the youngest carrier that it's really not 4 equal carriers. It's like T-Mobile's playing catch up and Sprint has, for the most part, failed in their postpaid segment. Berkey says, hey, from Canada. Glad you could be here, Berkey. Thank you for stopping by. So my goal was to be on here for about 30 to 40 minutes. We're currently at the 33-minute mark. So what I want to do is kind of open this up to a Q&A or a kind of like a live chat comment read. So if you guys have anything you want to talk about or ask or mention, go ahead and put it in the live chat, and I'll try to get everything here with the last few minutes that I have available for today's live stream of the podcast. Chiho says, I'm against the merger, 5G or not. I was never dependent on this merger. T-Mobile said that to press politicians. Yeah, I mean, if you're against the merger, I see this quite a bit. Most people that are kind of either indifferent or don't care about 5G are quite often against the merger. For those people that are excited about 5G and are ready to get to the next network technology, they're obviously pro-merger. With this merger, the 5G network can be deployed much more rapidly, and it can also be deployed on a larger scale. So I think by themselves, I think Sprint would have probably the slowest rollout of 5G, and I think T-Mobile's 5G would also be very slow and be limited to just a few considerable blocks around, just 10, 20, 30 markets. We need to see 5G on a grand scale. We want to see it nationwide. This merger does give some hope to that. So, yeah, I guess if you're not really for a 5G rapid deployment, then maybe you're not pro-merger. Raphael says, what do you think about Cricket? Any thoughts about them? I like Cricket. I wouldn't call it a performance-based prepaid provision. I think Cricket has a lot of limitations. If you know what you're getting into, it's fine. My biggest problem with Cricket is that I'm not a big fan of AT&T in terms of what they've kind of been doing lately. Obviously, they're trying to acquire everything and anything under the sun. It's just a big business, tactic. But I'm also not impressed by that whole 5G evolution thing that they did recently. AT&T just kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth when it comes to what they've been doing recently. So I'm not really impressed by Cricket in a lot of ways. Some of their plans are very competitively priced. Obviously, they're on the AT&T network, so it's pretty reliable and expanded coverage. But their speeds are a little on the slow side, especially for their unlimited plan. But yeah, their coverage is excellent. Their network performance is usually pretty good. So as a carrier, as a network, I like what they do in terms of their business approach and what they are for consumers. I mean, I think some of the things that they do are kind of questionable. I could say the same thing about Verizon as well. Let's see here. Madman says, my main hope is that Sprint converts to GSM for postpaid and the associated MVNOs. The device selection is so limited with CDMA. Madman, I will say that currently in 2019, the whole CDMA GSM thing is really not an issue anymore. Everything's being done through LTE. For the most part, I mean, just the exception of Sprint. Every company is focusing on LTE. Voice is over LTE, data is all running through LTE. It's less of a thing. Even Verizon has moved 99% of its network traffic to LTE. All their calls are over LTE. Verizon stopped selling phones that are 3G only last year, and AT&T is doing the same here in the next couple of years. They're going to be decommissioning all things, 3G and any other technology. It's going to be all LTE. So less of a concern moving forward in the future. D. Harris says, I think Verizon should lower unlimited plans on postpaid. Well, D. Harris, in case you haven't noticed it, they actually just increased the pricing. And not only that, in terms of their 5G deployment, they're going to be charging an additional $10 premium add-on for Verizon 5G, what they're calling Verizon 5G mobility. So pricing on its way up from Verizon. And that's a pretty, that's what we expected from Verizon. I'm not caught off guard at all. Max Anderson, glad you could be here. Thanks for stopping by, buddy. Balthaz Cesar, I don't even know if I could say that. CDMA is going away very soon. Sprint plans to shut down their CDMA network by 2021. Verizon is refarming their 2G and 3G to 4G LTE. Yeah, that was announced, I think, a couple of years ago, at least a year ago, maybe longer. Verizon's focus is LTE. AT&T's focus is LTE. Everybody's focus is shifting to LTE. The fact that Sprint is relying so heavily on their CDMA is concerning, actually, because data, the LTE works for that. Long-range technology is for that purpose. Mark Garcia says, and glad you could be here, Mark, from the Sneed Mobile Tech YouTube channel. Mark says the whole 5G rollout is going to be much slower than they're saying and will be very pricey for the consumer. Now, Mark, you're 100% true. The rollout is ambitious. People think that the 5G networks are going to be ready in a year. In terms of mobility, we could probably start to see markets getting it this year, but it's only going to be isolated. It's going to be a handful of markets. And then it's going to be very situational. It'll be on this block. It'll be on that block. We look at Chicago with the Verizon 5G mobility. It's like a handful of blocks in metropolitan Chicago. It's like the Loop, a couple other regions, the Magnificent Mile. I did a video on it on my YouTube channel over at SMT. Go ahead and check that out if you guys want to know about Verizon's 5G. But it's very, very isolated. It's not even on a city scale deployed yet. And we're talking about a big carrier, the biggest carrier in the US. So yeah, it's going to be very, very spotty, and it's going to be very isolated. So Mark, you're probably right about that. And saying that it's pricey for the consumer, if Verizon's going to be charging $10 as an add-on, I mean, I don't know how many consumers are going to jump on the initial 5G rollout, but if they're charging $10 a person, they're the ones that are eating up that initial expenditure on CapEx. Let's see here. Mr. I'm right, or I'm right. Can Sprint just go GSM like Metro did when T-Mobile bought them? I'm not sure what you mean there. They don't need to go GSM. It's not really a GSM thing moving forward. The focus is going to be LTE. Like I said, I think they would want to shift their focus there. Zachariah Brown says, do you think prepaid or postpaid is better value-wise? Love your videos, man. Keep up the good work. Thank you for chiming in, Zacharias. I appreciate that. Thank you for the compliments there. I think in terms of value, it's always best to go prepaid. Obviously, it just kind of depends on what you need. There are a lot of features that postpaid has that a lot of people don't use or don't need. In that case, you go prepaid and you could save some money, especially if you're going single line. Now, if you're going family plans and you're going to have 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 lines, oftentimes postpaid can be much more affordable. So a single unlimited line with like AT&T and Verizon might be somewhere in the range of $80 to $100. A similar line in terms of resolution, output, and speeds, you know, and being unlimited, I mean, that prepaid line might cost $40 or $50 with a prepaid carrier. So if you don't need certain postpaid features, it's always better to go prepaid or MVNO. So in that case, you would save money by going prepaid. Let's see what else we got going here on the chat. D. Harris says, what are the speeds going to be for 5G? So D. Harris, it depends. If you're talking mobile 5G or if you're talking fixed 5G. Fixed 5G would be like there's an access point in your house that connects to an access point that's, you know, 1,000 feet away or 1,500 feet away, like by an apartment complex or by a building block. Fixed 5G is going to be much faster than mobile 5G. But in terms of speeds, to answer your question, I think mobile 5G will be anywhere between like 100 megabits per second to maybe 500 megabits per second. I don't think we're going to get legitimate gigabit speed with mobile 5G for a while. Maybe not like 5 or 6 years. I think within 5 years, we'll start to see, you know, 800, 900 megs per second, a gig per second. But, you know, that's not for a while. Fixed 5G will be much faster. Obviously, the access point is closer, direct line of sight, the speed potential is much greater. So if you're talking fixed, it's going to be a lot faster. If you're talking mobility, probably less so. But the key to 5G isn't just the speed. I think a lot of people kind of miss out on this. It's the latency. I mean, we're talking sub 1 millisecond. Think about that for gaming. Like, if you're an autonomous vehicle application, or if you're talking robotics for medical technology, like that latency is perfect. That's what that technology requires. So really 5G is not just about speeds, it's about the reliability of connection, it's about the latency, it's about staying connected and it being like instantaneous. So not just speed, but those other things included. Let's see here. Nino says, so I have a question. How much does it cost to add a line from Metro by T-Mobile? I think it matters if you currently have a line, so if you'd be adding a second. The last I checked, they were running a really good special for like up to 4 lines. You know, the Metro is very, very competitive. I really hope that the merger doesn't affect competition in the prepaid segment. I mean, if you think about the cost conscious and people that live, you know, in lower income situations, and maybe it's a fixed income situations, these people rely on competition and prepaid. I mean, think about all the different promos you get if you switch from Boost to Metro or from Metro to some other prepaid MVNO. Like they compete in a very like ravaging way. It's almost cutthroat to see the competition in prepaid. I would hate to see that go away. So to me, honestly, it's really, really important that the prepaid side stays viable and competitive. Mark says, how did you and JG hook up? So like I've been subscribed to JG for a while. You know, he's been making great content for years and I've been following him and subscribed to his channel. And, you know, he came across my channel. He approached me about, you know, maybe doing a podcast, and this is kind of where we're at right now. And all is well here with Sneed Mobile Tech and the JGnation. So that's kind of how it went. All right, so that puts us at about 45 minutes. I think we're going to kind of leave it at that. For those of you that were here in the live chat, I want to thank you guys so much for participating in the discussion. For, you know, anybody that had a comment, thank you so much. in the future, we're going to be doing this podcast every week. We're going to shoot for every Sunday around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So whether you're on the West Coast in California or you're on the East Coast in New York City, go ahead and subscribe and ding the bell to be notified. So whenever we do go live, you guys get notified of that. For those of you that aren't aware, my name is Sneed from Sneed Mobile Tech. I do have a YouTube channel. Link in the description below. Go ahead and check out my channel, subscribe to that, ding the bell to be notified so you get all of my uploads, great content there. I want to thank JG for the opportunity to begin this podcast here every Sunday, 7 o'clock. So thank you for him allowing me to come on here. And also I want to thank all of my longtime subscribers and viewers on the Sneed Mobile Tech YouTube channel. And I want to thank all of the JG Nation for having me today on the podcast. I hope you guys come back. Looking forward to doing it again next Sunday, same time, same place. That's it for this one. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed your time on the podcast. So thank you again so much. I will see you guys on the next podcast. Peace.